something I need to cover before I get into the news. Following several issues, people using both mine and, more importantly, Kim's time, and requesting that people to not ask questions on projects or funding or when the funding is due. Now, it's just become very time consuming, and I ask you all who are interested in doing projects to prepare them all in private and keep hold of them. You can send them to the website, thepeoplesclub.org, but don't expect returns or to answer questions on them. That will all be done after the funding is released. Now, Kim's time in particular is taken up far too much by project leaders requesting information on several things that is consuming far too much of hers and our time, when our focus would be better on securing the funding first. Then we can deal with the projects and the various fundings required going forward. So please, no more requests for details on proposals or funding or help with it, and I thank you all for your consideration. Right, let's get into some news. And the first one is from Alaska, and this is a common theme. Snake oil people cornering the market, backed by various rogue elements, and forcing people out of their homes, and also forcing people to not be able to afford them or the rent. Now, in Elmendorf, Richardson Military Base in Anchorage, Alaska, there's a 7-block mobile home park, which is named the Four Seasons. And rentals start at $1,300 per month for a mobile home, really. And it's at least one of 40 multifamily properties in the area, or about 12% of the city's entire rental market, and it's all owned by Widener Investment Services Inc. I don't know whether that's related to Jay Widener of Alt Media fame or infamy, depending on which way you look at that guy. And the real estate agents in Alaska are saying this is like the £800 gorilla in the town. And 4,000 apartments are a fraction of the more than 38,000 units that the company owns in Seattle, Phoenix, Colorado, Texas, Canada's Alberta and Saskatchewan provinces and other markets. And together the properties have a net value of $2.3 billion. Now, this makes the company's 72-year-old founder, W. Dean Widener, a billionaire. Greg Sabana, as a spokesman for the Widener Apartment Homes, declined to comment. And a partner, Andrew Kinstler, a partner at law firm Helsel Fetterman in Seattle, said in a phone call that Widener didn't want to be featured in the article. And the gist of it is that they all suck up all the big properties that clients would like to buy, and usually in a private sale before he even hits the market. This is a common theme of skullduggery in local city councils. You have people there who pass bits of paper privately before it goes up to the public auction, and they swoop in and take all the best properties, and then no one's got any left. That's an example of greed, not need. Next three stories involves Israel, or the Zionists more in particular. And this first one involves Holland, or the Netherlands as it's now called. And Palestinians in Holland will for the first time be able to list the West Bank, Gaza and East Jerusalem as their place of birth. And this is in part because of a Dutch policy that Israel has no sovereignty over those areas. and the Dutch State Secretary Raymond Knops informed the House of Representatives in The Hague of the change on Friday, explaining the decision was based on the Dutch point of view that Israel has no sovereignty over these areas and the fact that Netherlands doesn't recognise Palestinian sovereignty either. Who made the Netherlands the adjudicator of that? Begs the question, but there you go. And natives of these areas who are living in the Netherlands currently have two options when specifying their birthplace at the Dutch Civil Registry as Israel or unknown. Now, the unknown option was only added in 2014 following protests seeking fairer options. And these options apply to Palestinians born after May 15th, 1948, when the State of Israel was created by the British. It never existed previously, in my opinion. Well, natives now resident in the Netherlands are still excluded from simply listing Palestine as their birthplace. They will now be able to use the name of the territory they were born in. Beyond ridiculous. So, as the Netherlands doesn't recognise Palestinian sovereignty, so the move is seen as a slightly positive step, people identifying from being there, while the UN and 136 countries do not recognise Palestine as a sovereign state. It's their country, really. And many EU countries are said to be waiting for this to be established as part of a peace agreement in the region. Really. Palestine has to be established as a nation. No, Israel has to be established as a sub-state of Palestine, not the other way round. Israel has announced it will be closing all UN schools, which is known as the United Nations Relief Work Agency schools in East Jerusalem, to replace them with Israeli-run schools in a blow to Palestinians again. The agency has complained it was not told of this decision, and Israel's National Security Council decided it will revoke permits for the schools which are run by the United Nations Relief Work Agency in East Jerusalem, and the agency which provides education, healthcare and social services for Palestinian refugees in East Jerusalem, Gaza and the West Bank, Jordan, Lebanon and Syria. And it runs 7 schools in Jerusalem which serve 3,000 students. Now, the report said the schools would come into the care of Israel's Jerusalem municipality that uses the curriculum set by the Israeli Education Ministry, and it's, according to the report, a rather disturbing idea for Palestinians and their wish for self-determination. Now, currently, East Jerusalem is occupied Palestinian territory which Israel annexed in 1967, and Israel views all of Jerusalem as its capital, while the Palestinians see East Jerusalem as capital of their future state. Now, the UN spokesman, Sami Meshasha, said the UN's existence in Jerusalem is not a gift from Israel, and explaining bilateral agreements bind Israel to respect the agency's installations, jurisdiction and immunity in Jerusalem. And in addition, Israel is a party to the 1946 Refugee Convention, and such attempts are in violation of this convention, he added. Yes, Israel has had more violations of the UN Convention than the rest of the countries on this planet put together. And yet nobody wants to do anything. Final story from Israel. They're talking about an apartheid hospital which is drawing condemnation for making Palestinians exit a bus to be searched before entering its grounds, with thousands of activists demanding an end to the discriminatory policy. The bus number 18 stops. That's interesting, isn't it? Bus number 18, AH. Oh my. Stops outside Barzillai Medical Centre in Ashkelon, and people suspected of being Palestinian must show their identification and get off the bus to go through a security check. The papers, please. It's all the same people that ran it, that's why. And the Association for Civil Rights in Israel and Physicians for Human Rights has documented several cases of discrimination and abuse. Palestinian passengers who have no intention of entering the hospital but are simply taking the bus beyond that stop must disembark and wait to be picked up again when the bus leaves the grounds to continue on its route. And a video shared by Haaretz shows a security guard boarding the bus as a number of Palestinians get off before the vehicle drives through. This has to stop. There's a lot of people who are claiming anti-Semitism and all kinds of other people labelling Jewish people, but they have to stop. Their Zionist government operating these sorts of heinous civil rights abuses. It's their country, not yours. Next we go to America and Lockheed Martin. Contractors involved in a multi-billion decontamination effort at the notorious Hanford nuclear site have been accused of defrauding US taxpayers. No change there, is there? Now, this is according to a lawsuit against Mission Support Alliance and Lockheed Martin. MSA has a 10-year, $3.2 billion contract with the Department of Energy to support the decontamination effort at the decommissioned nuclear production complex known as the Hanford site. And the report said they were allowed to pick subcontractors, no surprise there either, for the nation's largest and most expensive environmental cleanup at its own discretion. No oversight. We'll hear more about no oversight later. And the MSA abused its authority and awarded improper favourable treatment for kickbacks, according to the Justice Department this week. Now, the lawsuit alleges that Lockheed Martin LMC and Lockheed Martin Services Inc. paid more than $1 million to executives of MSA, which was conveniently co-owned by another Lockheed subsidiary at the time. They're all interlinked. It's a bit like Citadel and NYPD and Vice. They're all interlinked. In order to secure a $232 million subcontract to provide management and technology support at the Washington State nuclear site from 2010 through 2016. Now, the Justice Department has alleged that the services were provided at inflated rates, and in some cases the Department of Energy was even billed twice. This is a common theme, a much common theme, by both MSA and Lockheed for the same work. In addition, the suit accuses Jorge Francisco Amico, who served as both the vice president of LMC and the president of the MSA, of abusing his authority for financial gain by his simultaneously held posts. Unbelievable. Venezuela. Amid the tightening noose of US sanctions, Venezuela's state oil company PDVSA is reportedly moving bank accounts of its joint ventures with foreign companies to Russia's Gazprom Bank. This was according to Reuters. For those of you who don't know, Reuters is run solely by the CIA and the rogue elements to boot. Customers of PDVSA joint ventures with US-based Chevron Corp, France's Total SA, and Norway's Equinor and other projects with foreign companies have reportedly been instructed to deposit their payments into Russia-based bank accounts following the latest crippling round of Washington sanctions, which was imposed on January the 28th. Now, a fresh round of sanctions are aimed at cutting off the government of Nicolas Maduro from oil proceeds. Really? Well, I never. After Washington recognized the self-proclaimed interim president Juan Guaido and claimed that Venezuela's state funds and profits should be controlled by the legitimate government, which actually it is, and not the puppet stooge Guaido. This has got nothing to do with Washington or Trump. I can tell you that right from the off. Nothing. You'll find out more why later. The state oil giant has been urging its foreign partners to make formal decisions on whether they want to bow to US pressure and bail out or preserve stakes in the joint projects and continue their business in Venezuela. Besides dozens of joint ventures with Western companies, PDVSA also has many projects with Russian companies and also Chinese investors who, according to some assessments, might lose the most from US economic pressure on the Latin American company. As for Gazprom Bank, they completely dismissed the Reuters story as inaccurate. Go figure. BRICS, we haven't heard from them for a while. The world's saviours. Back in 2013, declared bollocks in 2014. But some don't listen, some like to carry on. Well, they are now considering an internal gold trading platform, which, if memory serves me correctly, and it generally does, they were doing this back in 2012 and 13. It's now 2019, so now they're reconsidering it. And when this happens, the global economy will be significantly reshaped, which they said they were going to do back in 2012, and the West will lose dominance. This is according to a precious metal expert. Really. In 2016, 2,338 tonnes of physical gold were traded, which was 43% more than in 2015. And gold is moving from the west to the east. And we have put the BRICS initiative into a broader context. It's just part of a geopolitical tectonic shift which started decades ago. That part is correct. Whether it takes place is debatable. And they report we've seen a constant outflow of physical gold from the west to the east, yes, done by the bloodline families and the psychopaths. And at the same time, the West has lost the economic war. And as a consequence, the focus now turns to the financial system. China dominates the world economy and has displaced the US as the world's most formidable economic powerhouse. And the creation of a new gold standard by BRICS is also a step to end the US dollar's domination of the global economy, as Beijing and Moscow understand that America used the dollar to control the world. Now, America didn't use the dollar to control the world. The clowns did. The financial structure and centre of the world is not in America. It's actually in England, or on English soil even though the City of London is not part of England, technically, or part of London. They wish to implement a new type of gold standard 2.0, and they want to distance themselves from this control. Furthermore, the vast majority of people in Asia sees gold as superior or real money, which is something the West have forgotten because of all the paper wealth credit they have accumulated, according to Mr. Grass, who was speaking to RT. And the expert notes that the BRICS countries account for 40% of the world's population and around 23% of the world's domestic product. This is just a rehash. It's like loop news. We were going on a new gold standard. I remember it in Cosmic Voice. That's 3 years ago now. And they were going to do this and they were going to do that. And they were going to save all the world. Except the key is in that narrative. Everything was shifting from the West to the East. The Federal Reserve, the UN, you name it. The main financial stock exchange has gone from London and the Federal Reserve in America to the Federal Reserve in Beijing. All part of the 1912 ruling. 100 years for the West, 100 years for the East. That's no longer happening. I can assure you of that, because they have far less than they realise. Mouth on legs, New York Democrat socialist Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is calling now for all Latino people to be exempt from immigration laws because they are native to the United States. And the Congresswoman made the comments during a speech this week when she vowed to defund the US Immigration and Customs Enforcement, known as ICE, and declared she will push for Latinos to be exempt from immigration laws in the US because they descended from the indigenous people of North America. We are standing on native land, and Latino people are descendants of native people, and we cannot be told and criminalised simply for our identity and our status. The latest mouthpiece puppet. I should have put this next news item after the BRICS, really, because this is a sign of the panic now by certain Western globalists that they're going to miss out, and something has to change, because the East is not going to fulfill what they propose they're going to do, ever. And so now pops some of the globalists warning countries to beware. Except this particular person is actually dead, George Soros. But an article written on his behalf this week has called on globalists and pro-European voters to wake up before the continent sleepwalks into oblivion. That was the globalist plan, remember? Ahead of the coming European elections, Soros, or whoever wrote that piece, explained in an article for a business website, MarketWatch, that the EU is facing a similar fate to that of the Soviet Union, and Europe is sleepwalking into oblivion, and the people of Europe need to wake up before it's too late. If they don't, the European Union will go the way of the Soviet Union, all by design. Neither our leaders nor ordinary citizens seem to understand that we are experiencing a revolutionary moment, that the range of possibilities is very broad, and that the eventual outcome is thus highly uncertain. Which is correct. Which is why the EU needs to stop giving money to NATO clowns to continue the destruction of the West. Or why certain leaders of the EU are allowing the globalist plan of flooding the country with migrants. That was deliberate, all of it. To basically crash the economy there, which was a deliberate policy of the globalists, was everything was going east. And B, to cause an increase in racism, and C, divide and conquer. D, the more hidden one, is to transfer undesirables into regions where they can cause false flags and other certain events. Canada next. Mr. Trudeau, what is it? Yep. Parliamentary Ethics Commissioner said on Monday that he would look into allegations that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau improperly pressured his former Attorney General to call off a criminal case involving a major engineering company based out of Montreal. Now, the announcement, made in a letter to two members of Parliament, followed several days of allegations in Canada that Mr. Trudeau or members of his staff improperly tried to force a settlement of charges that the company SNC Lavalin paid millions of dollars in bribes to officials in Libya, of all places. It's almost like America with Iran, is it not? When the country was ruled under Mr. Gaddafi. Now, the allegations of the push to drop the case first surfaced last week, and citing anonymous sources, the newspaper said that Mr. Trudeau's office had pressed Jody Wilson-Raybould when she was his Justice Minister and also Attorney General, in turn to pressure prosecutors to use a new law that would allow a remediation agreement with the company that would prevent a trial in exchange for paying a penalty. So in other words, they didn't want the people of Canada knowing that they're operating with the enemy, so to speak. Of course, Libya, oh, horrible country, all terrorists, we must bomb them into oblivion, a bit like Iraq and Kuwait and all the others. When the same people who are going along with that genocide program are doing backdoor deals. Subsequently this week, Mr. Trudeau's ambassador resigned, spelt Fired. US Federal Emergency Management Agency, emergency management, zero management, Chief Brock Long has announced his resignation, also spelt Fired, and the latest senior name to leave the Donald Trump administration. He has been in post since June 2017, and according to this piece, he has led the response to several extreme natural disasters. They weren't natural, and they had no response, including the heavily criticised operation in Puerto Rico after that devastating hurricane, which they did nothing. Mr. Long was also involved in a row of the use of government resources, and in a statement he said, "It was time for me to go home to my family." That's fine for you, Mr. Long, but what about the families in Florida and Alabama and Georgia and North and South Carolina and also California, who are all still in tents 4 months later because you and your goons and Mnuchin at the Treasury are blocking it? Time for me to go home to my family. Time to go to jail, if you ask me. So Mr. Long, who has years of experience in emergency management, which is a misnomer in and of itself, added that this had been an opportunity of their lifetime, and that during his tenure the agency known as FEMA had worked in more than 220 declared disasters and delivered in none of them. Final news item: US prosecutors have accused a former US Air Force officer of spying for Iran. What about Obama? What about Hillary? No? Oh, okay. We'll just pick some unknown person out of the line and blame them. In what was an elaborate operation that targeted her fellow intelligence officers, Monica Witt, who allegedly defected to Iran in 2013, probably to set up the Muslim Brotherhood at the behest of Mr. Obama, has previously worked as a US counterintelligence officer. 4 Iranian citizens have also been charged with attempting to install spy software on computers belonging to Ms. Witt, and according to the FBI, Ms. Witt was last seen in Southwest Asia in July of 2013, just after Benghazi. Counterintelligence. Put 2 and 2 together.